Well, good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me today. And my topic is rebellion, as you just heard. And I looked at the program when I got here, and it said rebellion, opposition to one in authority or of dominance. Nobody has more authority or dominance over you than you. So what I'm going to focus on today is rebelling against those forces that are in our life that try to keep us small, that try to keep us from being the person we're capable of becoming. And I think if you start there and you're able to rebel against those forces and be the person you're capable of being, then you'll go a long way to changing things. So rebellion, being a change agent, I changed the game. I've had the good fortune of being the CEO of Acosta, a company that was founded here in 1927, actually in our 83rd year. I didn't start the company. But I joined the company in 1983. We had 90 employees. We had about $4 million in revenue. We were operating in 3 states, Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. I joined the company. 10 years later, became president of the company in 1993. In 1996, I became the CEO of Acosta, and I was the CEO up to 2010. So we had 90 people. Today, we have 20,000. We had $4 million in revenue. We have $1 billion in revenue today. We did about 100 different mergers and acquisitions during the time that I've been with the company. And when I joined in 1983, there were about 2,500 agents, sales and marketing agencies in our industry. Today, there are 3 that control about 90% of the business. So I have had the just good fortune and the privilege of being part of a company that transformed itself from a small local enterprise to a national, multinational enterprise, and being able to grow jobs from 90 employees to 20,000 employees. I want to share a little bit about that story with you because I think it's fascinating. At least it was for me as I went through it. I thought I'd just start out, though, and tell you a little bit about myself, if I'm going to come up here and command about a half hour of your attention. I'm not from here. I grew up in New Hampshire, the great state of New Hampshire, where the license plate says, live free or die. And I grew up on a chicken farm. My dad was a small-time farmer. And I'm so glad that I did. When I was a kid, all I did was complain about it. Because I don't know if you know much about raising chickens. He was in the business of selling what they call table eggs. Okay, so he had 20,000 laying hens. A chicken lays an egg once a day. Okay? So you got to feed the chickens, and you got to make sure they have water, and you got to give them shelter, and then you got to make sure that they lay the egg, and then you got to get the egg. They lay every day. They don't take Sunday off. So you got to work on Sunday as well. But I learned 3 really important things on the farm. First was a work ethic. You don't grow up on a farm and not have a good work ethic. So, my dad had 3 boys. I was one of the 3 boys, and we all had chores to do every single day. I also learned the value of $1. My dad would pay me a very small amount of money. There was child labor issues, I'm sure. But he would pay me like 50 cents an hour, and then when I wanted a bike, and the bike was, $20, he'd say, when you get to 10, let me know, and then I'll match the other 10. And then I'd, go and buy the bike. So nothing ever came to me for free. It was always work, save, and then the reward was, he would match it. He should have been, I figured out years later, he should have been paying me $1 an hour to begin with. But that was his incentive. And the third thing that I learned on that farm was a sense of responsibility. And, the eggs just keep coming. You know, you have to feed the chickens at 6:30. You got to pick up the eggs at 7:30. And then you got to gather all the eggs, and then you got to wash them at night, and you got to weigh them and sort them. And so there was always work to do, and I had to show up. So a sense of responsibility. So 20,000, small-time farmer, did it as I grew up throughout my life. I say they were laying eggs because there were no roosters. So this is sort of a biology lesson, but if there's a rooster, then they become fertile eggs, right? And the fertile eggs then go get hatched, and you get a little baby chicken. If it's a laying egg with no rooster, it's not fertile, and it goes into consumption. So the eggs that you eat today are table eggs. The interesting part that I learned about, my dad 1 year did do fertile eggs, so he had to populate with roosters. 1 rooster for every 10 chickens. How about that? That'll wear you out. So anyway, I grew up on a farm, strong work ethic. I'm 57 years old. I have a wife who is my childhood high school sweetheart. I know all the women like that. I always say that for the women. They like that. She's put up with me all these years. We have 2 children. And I went to the University of New Hampshire to be a teacher and a coach. I wanted to teach and I wanted to coach. And I'd never pursued that, although I'm pursuing some education issues today. But I feel like I was a teacher and a coach in my career in growing Acosta. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Acosta. Before I do that, I wrote a book this past year. It's called Unreasonable Leadership. UnreasonableLeaders.com is the website. James in the back has the book, and he's on the website, so if anybody wants to buy it, he'll sell it to you. And Unreasonable Leadership, George Bernard Shaw said that all progress comes from unreasonable people. Because reasonable people adjust to their surroundings, and unreasonable people rebel against those surroundings and produce progress. And I believe that to be true. And that's what I've lived during the Acosta years as we grew the company. He also said, long-term happiness requires short-term discomfort. Long-term happiness requires short-term discomfort because people are happy only when they're learning, they're growing, and expanding. And to do that, you've got to put yourself in an uncomfortable situation. But what do we do as humans? Because this is kind of the way things work. We all, many times, look for that comfortable, safe, and reasonable place. Comfortable, safe, and reasonable place. And that's what reasonable people do. Unreasonable people rebel against it. And they produce progress. So rebellion must take place first against the forces that will keep you from being the person you're capable of becoming. Robert Louis Stevenson said, the person you are today and the person you are capable of becoming is the only reason you exist. Pretty powerful statement. So what are the forces that try to keep us in that comfortable, safe place? Fear. FDR said the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. And if you really think about that, that's true. Fear keeps us from becoming who we really are or can be. Risk aversion. Self-confidence. Fear of failure. Nobody wants to fail. So if I take that step and I fail, I'll be a failure, and oh boy, that's just not a good stigma to have. But we forget that when we were children, failure is what really taught us everything we know. So we started to walk and we fall, and we start to walk and we fall, and we keep falling, and we figure out after a little while that failure of falling, we figure out how to walk. And the same thing with a bicycle. So we fail, and we learn so much from our failures, and that helps us. When we become adults, we're afraid to fail. Those forces, fear of failure, the lack of self-confidence, the risk aversion. Those forces keep you out of what I call the growth zone. And after you get through the growth zone, you move into what I call the opportunity zone. And that's where real life takes place. When you push yourself to grow, to get uncomfortable, to move beyond those fears, then you can really discover who you are and become the person that you're capable of being. So if you don't rebel against those forces, you will become the greatest tragedy in life. And Norman Cousins said that the greatest tragedy in life is not death. The greatest tragedy in life is the death of what's inside of you while you're still alive. So when we stay small in that little comfortable zone, we're afraid to take risk, we die. We die. We're living, but we're dead. George Bernard Shaw understood this. Therefore, the quote, all progress comes from unreasonable people. Reasonable people get comfortable. Unreasonable people rebel against that comfort, produce progress. All progress comes from unreasonable people. He said it, and he understood it, and when he died, he was almost 100 when he died. When he was on his deathbed, his cousin came to him and said, you know, Mr. Shaw, you're a famous person, you're a playwright, critic. You've rubbed shoulders with so many interesting people. When you die, if you could come back and be anybody else, who would it be? And he thought for a second, and he said, you know, when I die, if I could come back and be anybody else, I would come back and be the George Bernard Shaw that I could have been, but was not. That haunts me. And I hope it haunts you. Because we have one life to live. Right? And if we don't use our gifts and our talents to use those gifts and talents to be the person we're capable of being to our fullest potential, then we will have left something on the table. So, all right, you guys follow me so far? So how do I do it? How do I get beyond the fear and the forces that don't allow me to grow to be the person I can be? And I think there's a couple of things. And one would be you need to develop strong convictions. And two, you need to develop courage. Those two combinations will do more for you to move beyond those forces. So that strong conviction that I believe so strongly in what it is that you want to change or what you want to do, that nobody's going to get in your way. And you might not know exactly how to do it, but you believe down deep that there's something inherently wrong, or there's something that needs to be changed, or it's not the way that it should be and it could be different. Strong convictions. Then you need to develop the courage. And, you know, we all go through this. You know, I'm up here speaking to you today. When I was 20 years old, I could not envision myself up here. I thought about doing this, and I just went right back to being in that comfortable, safe zone and said, that's not me. I can't do it. I'm not going to get up in front of a group of people and talk and perhaps sound like a babbling idiot. What if they make fun of me? What if they don't like what I have to say? Public speaking, actually, by the way, is probably one of the most feared activities, right? I mean, they say, geez, a lot of people would rather go to the death chamber than it wasn't that bad. So when you have strong convictions and courage to see those convictions through, you will then start to build your self-confidence. Because you can't get into that growth zone without having some self-confidence. So you need to be self-confident, and then when you're self-confident, then you start to believe in yourself. And when you start to believe in yourself, you'll realize that you have special gifts and talents that are unique to you. Each one of us is unique. You know, look around the room. There's no two people alike. You can take the whole city of Jacksonville and put them in this auditorium, this theater, and you look around the room and you'll realize again that no two people are exactly alike. And you could take everybody in the world and put them in this room. Be crowded. And there's no two people alike. What do you do? What do they do to you when you get arrested? Anybody been arrested? No, you don't have to say anything. What they tell me they do is they take your fingerprint. There's how many? 7 billion people in the world? That fingerprint is unique to you. So from the beginning of mankind to the end of mankind, there's only going to be one you. We're not a mistake. God made only one of us. Falconetti, you might be a mistake. Where's Falconetti? He said, make sure you call on me. So all this is taking place. You realize that you're unique and that I can make a difference. And you know what? I can do this not better than somebody else. Your glory doesn't come from being better than somebody else. Your glory comes from being different than somebody else. So I can uniquely make a difference. It's really transforming yourself first, rebelling against those forces that keep you small. And really, it's a mindset. I think, and I do believe this, that when you have that mindset, you have that self-confidence, and you believe in yourself, and you know that you're unique and that there's only one of you, and you can make a difference in this world, then you start to think about that. And when you think about it, the more you think about it, the more it'll come into action. That's what a mindset does. Be careful what you think about. Right? Be careful what you wish for. You might get it. So that mindset is really, really important. So what I'd like to do in the next few minutes is just tell you a quick little story, at least from my journey, what took place at Acosta. And it's really a story of rebellion. I think it's fascinating. We're in the food sales and marketing business. So our clients are Kraft, Procter & Gamble, Clorox, McCormick, Ocean Spray. We represent about 1,000 different companies today. They hire our organization to do the selling and the merchandising, outsourced to us, for them. And it started out years ago, 83 years ago, as those very, very small food companies that couldn't afford their own sales force would hire these, what they called food brokers or agents, as we call them today. And as that group of agents gained expertise and skill and grew and got scale, they actually became the real experts in the sales and marketing field, and more companies started to outsource. So I joined the company in 1983. In 1996, I became CEO. At the time, we were operating in 13 states in the South. And we had built out the organization through acquisition. And we didn't really want to lever up with the banks, so we used what was called seller financing. So we would go to an agent and say, okay, you know, we'd like to buy your business, and many times they were getting ready to retire, didn't really have a perpetuation plan, and let's assume that they were doing $1 million worth of revenue, and we decided to pay them $1 million for their business. We couldn't write them a check. We didn't want to go to the bank, and so we said, you hold the note. It'll be a note that's subordinated to the senior lenders and unsecured, and we'll pay you out over maybe a 5, 6, 7-year period. And you know, you can actually participate in the growth as we grow. So we did that a number of times during the 70s and 80s to get to the position that we were in the South. So I take over as CEO. We're in the South. Not knowing a lot about finance, and I had to grow and push myself to learn a lot and learn what a balance sheet was all about. I learned that I had a lot of debt. I had $156 million in long-term debt. And our shareholders' equity was actually a negative number. It was a negative $26 million. We produced free cash flow of about, I think it was $16 million at the time. But we were levered about 8 times. Okay, so 8 times our cash flow was our debt. Cash flow times the leverage, debt. Well, I didn't know this at the time, but when you're levered 8 times, you're about on the brink of not being able to make payroll. So I take over, we're levered 8 times, and Walmart gets in the food business. And they start to grow these supercenters. And then Kroger starts to say, geez, we got to do something to compete against Walmart. And so what was starting to happen was that the retailers were going to continue to buy each other to get buying power to compete with Walmart. And there was technology now in place to be able to buy your groceries all in one place. In fact, Walmart still buys everything in Bentonville, Arkansas. So we're in 13 states in the South, but we're not in Bentonville. And we see the future of this business is going to be a national business. We have got to have a national platform. We can't just be in the South. We're real good. We were really pretty good. But if we didn't move beyond where we were about ready to face our own demise. So we had to grow. We had to get national. So I'm levered 8 times, and I'm going all around the country trying to find people that'll lend me money, and everybody looked at me like I was crazy. You can't put any more debt on this business. So I had strong conviction. I actually brought the top 10 manufacturers that we represented, McCormick, Clorox, whatever, into Tampa, into a round table, and said, look, this industry is changing. We're only in the South, and we need to be national. And what I need to ask you is, if we become national, will you follow us, and will you give us, all your business? And around the table, and not one of them said they would. They said, absolutely not. And I said, well, why? Let's assume that we're the best everywhere. And they said, well, because we have relationships with other manufacturers across the country. We're just not going to dump those people. They've helped us build our business. And we're not going to put all our eggs in one basket and go with you. So that isn't exactly what I wanted to hear. So came back, still had that, that conviction that we needed to do it. So we didn't listen to them. And the only thing we could do was merge, because if we merged with somebody, we didn't create any debt. So we ended up doing a tax-free stock exchange with a company in the Midwest, PMI. They were in about 13 states in the Midwest. We got together, painted out this vision, said, look, I'm not buying you, you're not buying me, let's just merge the two. He said, okay, let's do it. So we did it. Now we're representing Tropicana orange juice down here in the South. He's representing Minute Maid. We issue a press release. Tropicana calls me up, says, you need to come down. We need to talk. So I drive down to Bradenton. I sit down with him. He said, look, we hate Minute Maid. We want to put them out of business. You will not be our agent if you're going to represent Minute Maid. And I said, well, we just merged, and that's the largest client they have. We can't just walk away from it. Let me ask you a question. If we get rid of it, will you give me Tropicana in the Midwest? And they said, well, no, we like the guy we have up there. We just don't want you to have Minute Maid. So I said, well, that doesn't seem fair. But okay, I get it. They're the boss. I weasel out of there, try to get myself, I said, give me a week. I go over to Houston, and I sit down with the CEO of Minute Maid, and and Minute Maid says to me, we don't like Tropicana. You can't be our agent if you're going to represent Tropicana. And I said, okay, well, will you give me Minute Maid? And he said, we might. Tell me about your plan. So I said, well, what we want to do is we want to buy people on the West Coast and in the Northeast and the Southwest. We're going to put this national network together. And he said, I'll tell you what. And I met this guy for the first time. He said, if you go get rid of Tropicana tomorrow, I'll give you Minute Maid, and I'll follow you wherever you go. I'll be your first national client. And I'm like, wow. This meeting's going a lot better. And he says, how are you going to do it? I said, well, you know, we're levered up like 8 times, and, you know, the banks won't lend me any money. So how much money do you need? I said, well, if I had $25 million, that would help, you know. He said, give me a week. I shake his hand, I leave. He calls me. I fly up to Atlanta. I sit down with the CFO of Coca-Cola. He said, you know, Ralph really likes you. He really wants to help you. How does 4% interest sound? I said, 4% interest? That sounds great. In a week, he wires me $25 million. Fascinating, isn't it? He wires me $25 million. So I said, hey, I got this. I got 2 minutes. It's going to take 7. So I'm going to rebel against him. So I said, geez, that's a source of revenue. Money. I'll call Clorox. The Clorox, we've been with Clorox for years. I fly out and I see the CEO of Clorox and I said, hey, this is what we're doing and we need some help. And he said, how much money? And I said, $25 million. He said, I can't do $25 million. He said, you know, I'd have to go to the board. And he said, I can do up to 10. I said, perfect. So he wires me $10 million. This is a true story. I'm not making this up. It's in my book. Buy it. So now I got $35 million, and I'm negotiating with a company in the West Coast, and we're trying to get it done, and I can't seem to get it done. You know, acquisitions are hard. And so it comes to find out I need about $60 million to get this thing done. So I go back to the bank. I said to the banks, look, Minute Maid and Clorox gave me $35 million. Come on. And the bank said, well, we'll do a little due diligence. So due diligence means they're going to come in and basically look at all your books. They come in and they find out, which we've told them, that all the owners, we had 40 owners, had what were called deferred compensation agreements. And that's how we got the value out of the business. So when I became 55 or 60 and I wanted to retire, the company would pay me out over a 7-year period, just like we bought these early guys, right? And the bank said, we don't like those. Because the bigger you get, the more revenue you have, the more you owe. And I said, well, yeah, that's why I'm doing this. And they said, well, those got to go. I said, they got to go. It's our retirement package. Everybody's worked for like 20 years, 25, 30 years. This is the retirement package. They can't go. No money. So we call a meeting in Chicago, bring all 40 people in. And so I have my agreement, and I stand up and I tear it up. And I said, look, this is my retirement agreement. By the way, it was worth about $15 million. I tear it up, and I said, you got to do the same. Because if you don't, we're not going to get the $30 million, and we're not going to get the dream done and get the thing built. And I'm the first one to do it. Everybody but 2 people tore up their agreement that day. We took those 2 people out back and we shot them. So they were actually older, and they were ready to retire, so we cut a deal, and we retired them out. The bank gives us $30 million. We buy the company on the West Coast. We go buy a company in the Northeast, Southwest. We got a whole national enterprise. We now have 10,000 people. And those 10 manufacturers who were in that room that day in Tampa that told me no are all my clients today nationally. Huh? Is that fascinating? So everybody, you know, told us we were crazy at the time. But we really believed. I mean, we had a strong conviction. And there wasn't anything that was going to stop us. And we didn't know how we were going to do it. And we didn't know where we were going to get the money. But we just went ahead and did it. And then, like, doors opened for us. So when you think about, well, geez, you know, this is impossible. I can't do this. Think again. How strong do you really believe? Do you have that strong conviction? And do you have the courage to do it? So I'm going to end now, and I'm going to end with a little something that is in my book. And it means a lot to me. I hope you get something out of it too. And it's really about attitude. And it goes like this. A man once found an eagle's egg and put it in the nest of a barnyard hen. There we go, chickens again. The eagle hatched and grew up with a restive brood of chicks and thought he didn't look at all the same. He scratched the earth for worms and bugs and played the chickens' games. The eagle clucked and clacked. He made a chicken sound. He thrashed his wings, but only flew some 2 feet off the ground. That's as high as chickens fly, the eagle had been told. The years passed, and one day when the eagle was quite old, he saw something magnificent flying very high and making great majestic circles up there in the sky. He'd never seen the likes of it. "What's that?" he asked in awe while he watched and wondered at the grace and power he saw. "Why, that's an eagle," someone said. "He belongs up there, it's clear, just as we, since we are chickens, belong earthbound down here." The old eagle just accepted that. Most everybody does. And he lived and he died a chicken, for that's what he thought he was. Thank you very much.